Hello and welcome to Confessions of a Yarn Addict. My name is Anniken. This is episode 51. Let's say it's episode 51. I think it's episode 51. I should always check this before I start filming. But this is Confessions of a Yarn Addict. My name is Anniken. I live in the southwest of England where it is nice and sunny today. And I design knitting patterns and I teach knitting workshop. And whether you are a returning viewer or it's your first time here, welcome. I really appreciate you being here. Thank you very much for joining me. Please give the video a thumbs up if you like it, and please subscribe if you haven't already. So today we're going to do another knit and chat video, and I actually decided to film this one sitting on my bed. We'll see how that works, because that way I can hold my knitting a bit more and set the camera angle so you can actually see what I'm doing when I'm knitting. Because the last knit and chat I did, which I filmed in my office, I was struggling to make sure that I could hold my knitting so you'd actually see me knitting rather than me just having my hands in my lap looking like I wasn't doing anything. Anyway, the last knit and chat I did a few weeks ago was quite popular. Several people said they really enjoyed it, so I thought I would do another one because I do have a few other topics on my list of topics that I didn't get through last time, so I thought I would go through some of those. I'm going to be knitting on my sock, so I cast this on last weekend. We were going to the cinema on Saturday, so I cast this on and probably got to about halfway through the rib nearly before the film started. Now, I was actually very, very lucky because I had actually planned to knit the whole sock in rib. I decided to knit it from the top down because I tend to do about 90 rounds for the leg, and then my foot minus the toe, so my foot from the toe to the afterthought heel is usually about 70 rounds. So I thought there's more knitting to do really on the leg than there is on the foot. And if the leg ends up a bit too long, that's fine. Whereas if the foot ends up too long, I either have to give it to Simon or rip it back. And I've done that before. I've taken a toe-up sock to the cinema before and then had to rip it back. So I didn't want to do that. So I thought I'd knit this one from the cuff down. And I was going to do 2x2 rib all the way through. But then I kind of did a bit, and then I thought, oh, it's just so much easier when I'm watching the film in the cinema to actually just do stocking stitch. So I was kind of trying to feel how much I've done. Normally if I'm doing a rib and then stocking stitch, I do about 30 rounds of rib, and obviously it was too dark to count it, so and I didn't have a row counter, so I just guessed, and when I came home and counted it, I'd done 31 rounds. I normally do 30, so I've done one more round than I normally do. The other thing I've just noticed as I'm sitting here playing with the rib, during the film, and this is the reason why I decided not to do rib, I actually dropped the stitch. It was a pearl stitch, so, and it was after the film had started, so I was trying to hold it up against the screen because if it's a light scene, sometimes you can see the stitches with the light background. So I was trying to see where I dropped it and trying to see if I could pick up the stitches. So because it was a pearl stitch, I turned it to the wrong side, so it'd be knit stitch, and then I was trying to see the strands that I had to pick it up because it unraveled something like 3 or 4 rounds. Anyway, I thought it was okay, and when I came home I had a good look at it just to make sure I hadn't dropped any stitches or messed anything up, and I've just noticed it now. So down here, I don't know how easy it's going to be to see this, but down here I missed one strand. So it's not actually that visible if I just hold the rib out like that. You see it there. It's not too visible. Because I am that far past it, I could drop down and fix it, but I don't think it's going to look very neat when you drop down that many rows. So I'm just going to leave it. It's one I basically just skipped one row on the rib, and it's the pearl stitch. And I don't think it's going to be, I mean, I can see it now, I know it's there, but I don't think it's going to be that visible, so I'm going to leave that. Anyway, while we're at the film, I knitted to, I think probably about there, around there, and then I finished the rest of the foot when I got home. I put in the yarn for the afterthought heels. Can you see that there's a one row of yellow there? I'm kind of thinking I should have probably done another round, and then I could have put the heel in just where it changed from turquoise to yellow, but I did it for a couple of rounds and I thought, oh, I can't be bothered to go back and pick it. Anyway, I've now put a marker in where I am now so I can see how much I actually get knitted while I'm chatting. Should get a few rounds knitted because this is fairly easy because it is just stocking stitch, so I don't have to look at it too much. So I do knit continental style with the yarn in my left hand. I was teaching this last weekend, actually. The last weekend? No, weekend before last, a couple of weeks ago. And I showed you a little bit of clip from that video in episode 50, which was 2 weeks ago. From the knitting hotel, I was teaching my finishing techniques workshop and my continental knitting workshop, one day of each. And they all really enjoyed it. They all liked the knit stitch and thought I was very quick, but some of them struggled a bit with the purl stitch, which is fine. By the way, you'll see a bit more up close how I knit because I have a little bit of a clip that I filmed on the moors yesterday because it was really, really nice and sunny, so you'll see that. Right, let's get on with our knit and chat, and I will see what topics I have for you today. Now, these are just my opinions on certain hot topics in the knitting world. You may or may not agree with me, that's fine. Sometimes I change my mind as well, that's absolutely fine. But just a few things, my opinion on a few things. Let me know what your opinion is on these topics and whether there's any other topics you'd like me to chat about in these knit and chat videos. I'm thinking I might want to do like one a month, we'll see. Okay, let's have a look. Oh, before we do, let me tell you what this yarn is. So this is the Little Grey Girl, who's a British indie dyer. She also makes really nice project bags. And I actually got this sock yarn, this early this year, at the end of last year. It might have been around Christmas time, I'm not sure. But I actually got it with a rainbow project bag. But the project bag's a little bit too big for what I normally use for socks, so I'm not using that at the moment. But the yarn is also the Little Grey Girl, and it is called Back to Sock, self-striped sock, yak sock. So I'm not sure the base is called Back to Socks or yak sock or whatever it is, or the colorway is called Back to Socks. I'm not sure. It might be the colorway that's Back to Socks. Anyway, the blend is 70% superwash merino, 20% yak, 10% nylon, and it's 400 meters per 100 gram. So a fairly standard sock yarn apart from the yak. Now, one word of warning when it comes to yarn that has yak in it. So to be fair, it does say here, hand wash gently in cool water with a little wool wash, lay flat to dry. So it does say to hand wash it. Now, a couple of years ago, no, it's before the pandemic, so probably about 3 years ago, I knitted a pair of socks. We were on holiday in Spain, and I knitted a pair of socks, and it was, can't remember the yarn company, but it was the same or a very similar blend to this. And because it has superwash merino, and I always wash my socks in the machine on the 30-degree wool wash. I washed them a couple of times on the 30-degree wool wash, and they were fine. And then I accidentally washed them on a 40-degree regular wash, and they felt it. So be careful. Even though this sock has got, this yarn has 70% superwash merino, the yak is not superwash, and it has got 20% yak. So be careful with these kind of blends. If it's got, say, 10 or 20% cashmere, yak, alpaca, any other animal fibre that might felt, just because it's got superwash merino, and it's mostly superwash merino, you still got to be careful with washing it. So I probably will machine wash these on a 30-degree, or maybe I will hand wash them. I don't know. I don't usually hand wash my socks because I can't bother. Anyway, a little word of warning there, learning from my past mistakes. so let's start with a topic. Let's talk about ethical knitting. Knitting, whether you should knit buy local or support ethical brands. And I guess this also leads into the whole environmentally friendly topic. Let me just check if my camera is straight. So there, obviously, with everything we buy, there is a big, I guess, movement to try and encourage us to shop local, which I totally agree with. I think that's great. But there are also people in other parts of the world that rely on our support and us purchasing their products. Let's take alpaca, for example. So there are quite a few alpaca farmers in the UK now, and there are yarn companies that specialize in alpaca, and there are other yarn companies that do like their own small batch alpaca yarns and things like that. So there are companies that specialize in alpaca yarns from the UK, and others that do like small batch farms that do like small batch alpaca yarn from their own flocks and that kind of thing. And then obviously there are a lot of alpaca producers in South America, which, if I'm not wrong, that's where the alpacas come from. And a lot of farmers there rely on alpaca because it's a big source of income for them. So should you buy only UK alpaca, or should you buy only South American alpaca? Because I guess you could say that maybe we've kind of stolen their trade in alpacas. I don't know. I don't know whether I go quite that far, but what should you do? So yes, I agree with buying local, and I think the British alpaca industry, or whichever country you live in, I would imagine most countries have alpacas, or at least most kind of higher income countries have alpacas now. I know there's alpaca farms in Norway, there's USA's got loads of alpacas, so you can probably get local alpaca in the country where you live. So should we buy these kind of yarns local, or should we support farmers overseas who rely on that money to survive? Obviously farmers in this country might rely on that money to survive as well, but I think it is quite a difficult topic, and I think everyone obviously has to do what they want to do, but I think it is one of those topics that can get a little bit difficult. You feel like you should buy local, but then you also want to buy ethical, and I'm not saying that just because it's produced in South America or wherever is ethical, but let's take, for example, company which I now stock in my online shop. I only have a few yarns at the moment, but I will be getting more throughout this year, and that is Manos del Uruguay, which is from Uruguay in South America. So they are a not-for-profit company that support women in rural areas. So they provide work for women in rural areas. So they've got very ethical business practice. They use, and I'm pretty sure they used to be registered as fair trade. I'm not sure they are anymore. I know that the whole fair trade thing is very expensive, and that some companies probably find it's not worth the money to be registered. I don't know whether that's the case with Manos del Uruguay or not, but there isn't a fair trade label on their yarns, so I don't know. But I feel really good supporting them because it is beautiful hand-dyed yarn. It is really nice, and it supports women in a rural area in a poor country that may not otherwise get work. But then also there are indies in this country that do similar yarns, not the exact same base, I think, but similar yarns. So do I support them? They obviously need to support their families as well. So these kind of weighing up the pros and cons can be a bit difficult. All I would say is maybe do a bit of both. I see some people who are just like, it's all about shopping local, you know, local, and that's great, but maybe sometimes we need to support businesses, especially businesses that come from poorer countries as well. Obviously you must do what you feel is best. We all have different views on this, but I try and split my spend on local and non-local because I think that's best for me. Let's talk about synthetic yarns. versus natural fibers. Kind of goes into a little bit what I was talking about before about knit local, shop local or not. There is very big divide between man-made fibers and natural fibers, especially man-made fibers like acrylic. I must admit I am a little bit of a yarn snob. Oh, I just dropped a stitch here. Because I knit with the stitches very close to my needle tips, which is part of what enables me to knit so quickly, it is very, very easy to accidentally slip a stitch off. I also knit with very slippery needles. These are my Chow Goo needles. So I do find quite often a stitch will just kind of slip off my needle, which isn't a problem because I can usually, especially when it's stocking stitch, I can pick it up quickly. A bit more difficult when it happens in the cinema. Okay, so what was I saying? Acrylic, right. So let's use the example of being vegan. So I'm not having a go at vegans here. We've got vegans in our family. So I'm not having a go at vegans, but a lot of vegans, some people are vegan because they don't like the use of animal products. Some people might be vegan because they, for environmental reasons. Now, so a lot of vegans will go for acrylic yarns over, say, for example, sheep's wool, because they don't want to use an animal product. And that's absolutely fine. I also want to say before I start this, because I am a little bit of a yarn snob, I do prefer to knit with natural fibers personally. I am doing a crochet blanket in Starcraft Special DK, which is 100% acrylic. I must admit, I'm not loving it. I like the colours, but I'm not loving the yarn. I do think there is a time and place for acrylic yarns. I do think if that's what your budget will stretch to, then that's absolutely fine. You have to, you know, stick to your budget when it comes to your crafting life as well. There are some cheaper natural fibers as well, so you might want to look at those if you think you can only afford acrylic. Also look at thinner yarns because they are more economical. Did we talk about that last time? I think we did, yeah. Pretty sure we talked about that last time. I'll knit the first knit and chat video at the end, by the way, and below. What was I saying? Oh yeah. There are things that I totally understand why people knit with acrylic, and there are certain things I would knit in acrylic. For example, if I was to knit my dog a dog coat, which I don't think I'm going to do because I feel like I can spend my knitting time on better things. And no judgment, if you want to knit a dog coat, go for it. But a friend of mine once knitted, well, she didn't knit them, she had somebody knit her dog coats for her 3 little dogs. They're very small, in quite a luxurious yarn, imported yarn. It's quite expensive. I'm not going to say which yarn it is. And I was a bit like, are you sure you want to knit it in this yarn? Wouldn't it be better to knit it in acrylic or like a superwash wool so you can wash it easier? Because the yarn she was knitting with was hand wash only, and I knew that. But she wanted it in her favourite yarn, and she was insistent, and that's what so she bought the yarn, she paid someone to knit it. I personally would have knitted, if I was going to knit a dog coat, I would have knitted in something I could machine wash easier. Same thing if you're knitting for children, especially young children who might get, and babies, you might want to knit something that's easily machine washable. Also, some people are sensitive to wool, for example. I mean, there are other fibers that are not wool that people might be able to use, but people are sensitive to certain fibers. There may be an availability issue, or just a price issue. Natural fibers do tend to be more expensive than acrylic yarns and other cheaper yarns, man-made fibers. So that's fine. You know, you've got to do whatever you feel best. But the whole environmental issue is a problem because, now I'm not an expert on environmental stuff, but from what I understand, acrylic yarn is made from petrochemicals, and it's not a very environmentally friendly process of making the yarn. There are other issues with yarns that are seen as more environmentally friendly, like bamboo and tencel. From what I understand, there's an awful lot of water used in production of those yarns. And there probably are issues with using sheep's wool as well. So different yarns, different fibres have got different impacts on our environment, and I don't think we can get away from that completely. But personally, I would choose the natural fibre rather than acrylic, just because I prefer to wear it and I prefer to knit with it, and I just think it's nicer. But what I would say is buy the best materials you can afford, so the best yarn you can afford, the best needles you can afford, and definitely thinner yarns will go a lot further than thicker yarns. So if you're on a budget, that's quite important advice. So that is my views on acrylic yarns. Personally, I'm not a fan, but I do appreciate that there is a time and a place for acrylic yarns as well. Okay, let's talk about magic loop versus DPNs. So DPNs are double pointed needles, and they're usually used to knit a small circumference in the round. You can also use magic loop, which is what I'm using here. So magic loop is using a larger circular needle to knit a smaller circumference in the round. So you can see I've got a loop out that side, I've got a loop out that side. Half my stitches are at the back here, half my stitches are on my needle tips, which I'm knitting with now. I do have a video on magic loops, so I will link that below. My preferred method of knitting small circumference in the round is magic loop. There are other methods as well. You can use two circular needles, which means you have two longer circular needles and you have half the stitches on one, half on the other. But you have to remember to knit with the other needle tip on the circular needle that your stitches are on. I just find it gets a bit too complicated, and I feel like I've got all these needle tips flying around and I don't like it. So I don't tend to use the two circular method. You can also use a very small circumference circular needle, so I think it's like 20 centimeters or something. Not sure. I don't like it. I've tried it. It's basically big enough to fit the number of stitches you need for a sock. I've tried at least 2 or 3 brands, I think. I've only tried them for like a few minutes. I haven't actually bought a pair and like tried them for ages because I didn't think I'd like them. But I have actually tried some. I've had people lend me some at workshops and things like that just to try out. And the needle tips are very, very short. And I find I've got to kind of like hold them like that almost, and I just can't knit like that. So I can knit much quicker and easier on magic loop. I used to swear by using double pointed needles. I didn't really like using magic loop when I first tried it. I was teaching it, and I used it on things like sleeves and stuff if I didn't have the right size double pointed needles. But I wouldn't knit socks on magic loop. And then a few years ago, well, quite a few years ago, I decided for a whole year that I would knit all my socks on magic loop, and I do usually have a pair of socks on the go all the time. And I commit myself to knitting all my socks on magic loop for a whole year, and I haven't used my double pointed needles since. I've got quite a few of them. I don't know, maybe I should give them away to somebody, I don't know. But I haven't used them for years. Everything I need to knit, I knit on circular needles, whether it's big circumference, small circumference, straight, whatever it is, I always knit everything on circular needles. And the advantage for me with magic loop over double pointed needles is the fact that my needle tips are attached. So if I drop one needle tip, it's still attached to my cable. I can't drop a needle down the side of my chair, down the on the floor if I'm knitting out and about or on public transport. Yes, I have crawled around on the floor on trains and planes before trying to find my double pointed needle. I dropped it down between me and the gearbox in the handbrake thing in the car when I've been knitting in the car when Simon's been driving, and it is a bit of a nuisance, and I've lost several down the side of my chair. So with magic loop or circle needles in general, the needle tips are attached, so I'm not going to lose one if I drop it. And I know every time I pick up my knitting that I've got the needle tips I need to knit. I'm not going to pick up my knitting and find I'm missing a double pointed needle. So that's one of the reasons I like it. I also think it's easier and quicker. It wasn't quicker to start with. I had to keep practice and keep persevering with it to pick up my speed, but I do find it is quicker now than knitting on double pointed needles. So let me know, what do you prefer? Do you prefer magic loop or double pointed needles? Tell me in the comments below. Let's do a little progress check and see how far we've got. So I've knitted those rounds so far, so that's not too bad. I didn't actually see what time I started filming, which I should have done really, but never mind. Right, let's see what's next on my list of hot topics. Okay, I got 2 more topics I want to talk about. 2 of them are I'm kind of going to link them, and the first one is kind of linked to what we've been talking about using circular needles. Kinda, not really. Well, maybe, I don't know. And that is knitting in the round versus knitting flat. So I grew up in Norway where most people knit in the round. When I moved here, I knitted most of the sweaters I knitted in the round. A lot of stuff I thought was easier to knit in the round, and then I started designing for magazines. And when I first started designing about 15 years ago, most magazines wanted stuff that was knitted flat and seamed because that was what British knitters were more used to. That's changed a lot in the last 15 years. A lot of magazines now would like stuff that's knitted in the round because British knitters are more used to knitting stuff in the round, and also British knitters who are not used to knitting stuff in the round want to try new things. So a lot of the traditional yarn companies still do everything flat, seamed, all that kind of stuff. So I think magazines, I think they encourage stuff that's knitted in the round or unusual constructions. I wouldn't say knitting in the round is unusual construction, but there are advantages to knitting in the round and there are advantages to knitting flat and seaming. A lot of people think that knitting things flat and seaming gives it more structure, so you get the seams kind of provide structure to the garment and a bit of, yeah, just a bit of structure and kind of holding it together, a bit of shape. But also knitting in the round means you don't have to worry about sewing up and all those finishing things. I think certain things I like to knit in the round, certain things I don't. So for example, if I'm knitting colour work, then I like to knit colour work in the round. I will not knit colour work back and forth because I don't like knitting stranded colour work on the wrong side. Because of the way I purl, it doesn't work very well. So I don't like knitting colour work back and forth. I won't do that. Unless it's just a few rows, then I might, but I won't otherwise. So all my colour work sweaters have been worked in the round. I would think things that are a bit fiddly, like if I was going to knit a baby garment, I would probably do that in the round because it tends to be smaller and then it's less fiddly to sew up and stuff. So I'd probably knit that in the round. The disadvantage of knitting in the round is while you're knitting it, because you're basically carrying the whole garment around with you. And especially if you knit something where everything is knitted in one piece, so you're knitting the body and then you're knitting the sleeves onto the body. So by the time you get to the second sleeve, you've got the whole garment to cart around with you. So means that you've got the whole garment in your lap and you're knitting. If you're taking your knitting out and about with you, you've got the whole sweater. And especially if you're a larger size like me, that can be a lot of stuff to carry around with you. I've knitted, because I design for magazines, I quite often do a lot of winter knitting in the summer months. And I've sat in the garden in like 25 degrees knitting a heavy Aran weight wool sweater, which was all knitted in one piece, and I'm on the second sleeve and I got this big pile of wool in my lap. Also done the same thing in the car when it's been hot, driving to like knitting shows and things. So there are advantages in knitting stuff flat because you can knit smaller pieces and you can carry it around with you. The other thing is, if you knit something, so if you knit something flat, you tend to start with the back first. Most patterns will start with the back first, and they'll give you a chance to knit a bit of the back and then maybe check that the width is coming out the right size or that you're happy with everything. So say for example, I knit about that much of the back and then I measure it and I realize that my tension is a bit off and it's a bit too big or too small. I haven't knitted too much. I can still rip back and fix it. If I knit it in the round, that's twice as much knitting I've done, so that's quite a lot. Also, if you're knitting it in the round and then you notice you made a mistake further down, you've got to unravel everything if you can't just drop down and fix it. Some things you can just drop down a section and fix it, but some things you have to unravel. So if I've knitted in the round and I've got that far past where my mistake is, then I have to go all the way down to fix it. Obviously then that's twice as much knitting I have to redo because I've gone in the round rather than just knitting back and forth. So a few things like that can get a little bit annoying. But I think certain garments are better knitted in the round, certain garments are better knitted flat. I don't have any strong views either way on it. I get a little bit annoyed with people who say, I will only knit things in the round, I will only knit things flat, I will only knit things from the bottom up, I will only knit things from the top down. I prefer a bit of variety because I get easily bored, so I would rather have a bit of variety in my knitting rather than just have like set ideas that I stick to. Which also goes into the I hate seaming topic. A lot of people are like, I hate seaming, so I don't want to knit the sweater that needs to be seamed. I would rather knit everything in the round in one piece. I mean, if that's what floats your boat, fine. But, you know, don't discount stuff just because you hate one technique. Seaming doesn't take that long. It's not that much. In terms of the amount of time it takes you to knit the whole garment, seaming is fairly quick. So I think it's, for me, it's silly to say, I don't want to knit this garment because I don't like seaming. If you don't like cables and it's a garment that has cables all over, then that's fine. If you don't like lace and it's an all over lace garment, that's fine. But seaming is a relatively small part of your garment. Some people might be worried about not being able to seam up properly and neatly. And if that's the case, I suggest you take a finishing techniques workshop, like one of mine. So I teach finishing techniques in yarn shops. I teach it online. And it is a class that I recommend all knitters take. And I will show you how to sew up quickly and easily. And I will also show you loads of other stuff. I will link to my finishing techniques online course below if you're interested. I'll also link to my continental knitting online course below. So if you've been watching me knit and you're tempted by continental knitting, you can go and check that out as well. So I'll link those below. Checking the time, I think I'm going to leave it there. My back's starting to hurt. Sitting in the bed, like any bed, for me is not great. It doesn't give me quite back support, even though I've got a pillow behind me and I'm trying to lean against the headrest. It does cause me a bit of back problems. So when we go to hotels, we quite often stay in travel lodges and they don't tend to have any chairs, or they just have like a standard like dining room type chair, which is not very comfortable. And I find, you know, when you spend all evening like sitting on the bed, I always end up with back pain. So I can feel my back starting to hurt a bit now. So I'm going to stop doing this and get downstairs and do some more knitting on something else. Anyway, let me show you how far I got. So I've gone from there all the way up to there. That's pretty good. That's quite a lot. I don't know how many rounds that is. Let's quickly count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 rounds. I've done 20 rounds, 64 stitches on each round, so that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. I was going to start this sock last weekend. We went to the cinema, and then I was going to take it to Spain with me to finish. I'm thinking if I finish the first sock before I go to Spain, I might not take these at all. I might have to cast them for a new pair for when we go to Spain. Anyway, I am sure I will be back again with these knit and chat videos, and I'll be back next week with another videos. I release videos every Friday morning here on YouTube. If you like my videos, please subscribe, And if you don't want to miss a video, please click the notifications bell, and please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. If you subscribe and like the video, that does help me a lot to get seen by other people on YouTube. Please also leave me a comment and tell me your view on any of these topics that I've discussed today, and also let me know if there's anything else you think I should chat about, or if there's a tutorial you'd like, or anything else that you'd like me to do here on YouTube. Please let me know. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your time, and let me know what you're knitting at the moment. And I'm very happy with this rainbow sock. I will link the little grey girl below, so if you're in the UK, you can check her out. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.